Getting it started. Today we're going to talk about what is an IEP. Sorry, we're not starting there. That was last week. We're going to start with let's go through all of this. What is the process for getting an IEP? So last week we talked about the differences between an IEP and a 504. And today we're going to talk about how do we get an IEP started for our kids here at the Academy. So there's a couple different processes that you can take, routes to get you to an IEP through Chicago Public Schools or any public school in the state of Illinois. Again, as a reminder, IEPs are only for children who are going into public schools. Private schools, for the most part, do not utilize this process. They also do not honor IEPs. So if we are going the private route, just be aware that they may not honor or follow through with an IEP. So for public schools, though, they are required by law through IDEA to provide IEP services for those children who are found eligible for those services. So the first step is for early intervention to public schools. So when a child is aging out of early intervention at the age of 3, the discharge process should include a transition meeting with the public schools to talk about where they're at with their programs and goals, what recommendations they would make for school systems at that point in time. The service coordinator should be the one that's providing the written referral of a potential eligible child to the local education agency. And this is what gets that process started. So it should occur anytime between 9 months to no more than 90 days before the child's 3rd birthday so that they can get that transition process started. And if your service coordinator is not doing this, then the parent should reach out and ask about that process, that once they age out of EI, they can be found eligible for services within the public schools. This is different than a discharge meeting. A discharge meeting is just indicating that they are no longer eligible for early intervention. This is a transition meeting with the school system to indicate that they have been found eligible for a disability and would require services within the public schools. Parents, when they are going through the EI process and transitioning out of EI, they're not required at that point in time to take the school services that are being offered. They can continue with any private school placement, daycare, Head Start program, or here at the Academy until they turn the age of 5 going into 6. It's important that we start to advocate for this to occur even a child is going to be continuing private services here at CPTWC. It's a natural transition time for these kids to come out of early intervention services and into public school services. And it's much easier to get an IEP evaluation during that time than it is when a child is transitioning to a school. We can get an IEP as they're aging out of EI and then call for a meeting for it to be updated when they do the transition to a school. So you could say, thank you for all of this. We appreciate it. However, we're not going to entertain the idea of my child going to public school at this time. We're going to continue with private therapy services until they're ready to transition to school services for kindergarten or 1st grade. And then they'll just update the IEP at that point in time because they already have an evaluation. But we'll get into all of those in a second. And then early childhood is now universal. So this is through CPS, through all public schools in the state of Illinois. You do not need to be enrolled in an early childhood program in order to receive speech services. This is called a speech-only program. So you could have an IEP that is only for your speech services programs. There's also a preschool itinerant. You have access to an early childhood special education teacher in the general education classroom, up to 120 minutes per week. There's also a preschool inclusive or blended program where they have access to an early childhood special education teacher in the gen ed classroom for up to 500 minutes per week. And then there's also a preschool program with intensive support. This is basically a special education preschool classroom. Not all of these programs or services are available at all of the neighborhood schools in Chicago. So kids may get placed into a school that is not their neighborhood school to ensure that they are receiving FAPE as well as least restrictive environment and services. Okay, one more person waiting to join. Okay. There's also the process called child find. Each state must have policies and procedures in place to ensure that all children with disabilities residing in the state are identified, located, and then subsequently evaluated. In CPS, they do free early childhood developmental screenings for children between the ages of 0 and 5 years old. If your child is older than 5 years old, they would not be eligible for this screener, but this screener is appropriate for children birth to 5 years. Kids will complete the screener at the library. That's part of the child find process. These screeners will locate and identify the kids based off of these screenings that will then go on for being scheduled for evaluation. If an evaluation is deemed necessary, they will get directed straight to the citywide assessment team for the evaluation. It's important to note that a screener does not guarantee an IEP. The purpose of the screener is just basically to identify, locate, and determine if an evaluation is necessary. There's still going to be ongoing assessments of children within the general education classes if, the child is much older than 5 years of age or has already started school. So there still is a process for child find of identifying, locating, and evaluating within the school system, but it wouldn't be through these screeners that the citywide assessment team provide. I'll make sure to send this to everybody who is participating in today's webinar. As soon as this loads, this document, once it loads, will show you all of the dates and locations for the screeners. Some will occur on Mondays, some occur on Tuesdays. It also identifies the placement of the library as well as the times. The only issue is that there may be dates listed that if there is no school that day or there's a half day of school with the calendar set for CPS, they may not do the screening that day. So you always want to make sure that you're checking in to ensure that the screeners will actually be present at these different locations on those days in case there is a day that they are off or closed or whether, permits not to have us to have school that day. I will, oh, here we go. Give it a few seconds. Okay, I think I'll come back to this at the very end so you guys can see those dates. But like I said, I will also send it to you guys so you have access to it as well. There's also a self-referral process. So parents can request for an IEP. I cannot stress this enough. You'll probably hear me say it in all of my presentations. It must be written. You cannot just pick up the phone and have a conversation with somebody or talk with the teacher or a paraprofessional at the end of the day and say, you know what, I think my child needs IEP services. They might be eligible for that. That's not going to be enough. As much as we want to put trust in that process and know that that person may take that information and jumpstart the referral process, you need to make sure that for your own sake and for your rights to be upheld, that you are requesting it in written form. The school has 14 days after they receive your written request to approve or deny the request. So they can say, yes, we approve. We will move forward with scheduling an evaluation and meeting with you to discuss what domains we will be testing for eligibility. Or they could say, you know what, we don't have enough information at this point in time. We're going to deny your request. This is what we're going to do instead. If you ever get a denial of request, always ask why. Why are they not moving forward with the evaluation? What are the next steps? I want to ensure that my child is getting, some sort of support and help within the classroom and the school system to ensure that they're making progress. What are we going to do about this? You can also request to have a meeting with your educational team if they are not going to move forward with an evaluation to determine eligibility, to ask all of these questions and advocate for your child. This can happen before the child starts school. So I always recommend parents to get this process started as early as possible when they're thinking about transitioning to school services. Our BCBs within the CPTWC team are meeting with me as an academy director to discuss recommendations for school transitions, programming, goals, and things of that nature to ensure that we are moving forward in the best steps to get the child ready for transition to school, as well as the BCBA should be meeting with parents regularly to talk about this and discuss what are the next steps and where we're at with that process so that you are aware of when we should start this referral process for IEPs. The parent, if it is before starting school, I'll walk you through two different scenarios. You can request this through the Office of Student Disabilities to get the evaluation process started. Again, it has to be all written. Or the other one is to look to see where your neighborhood school is located and make the referral directly to that neighborhood school. Again, your child may or may not join your neighborhood school. It depends on if they have the services and the programming that is best to support your child. Your child may go to a different school, but at this point, the school district doesn't know if your child needs IEP services, so you have to go through your neighborhood school to request and refer them for an evaluation. I'll also make sure that you guys have access to the request for meeting, for an IEP meeting, and for the evaluation eligibility meeting. Keep it very brief. You don't need to go into a long list of reasons why you think your child requires an IEP or an evaluation to determine eligibility for an IEP. You want to keep it short and sweet and concise with at least 3 bullet points as to what your reasons are. Mainly also identifying that they have a medical diagnosis of, and insert that diagnosis, whether it be autism, speech and language impairment, whatever it is, making sure that you have indicated that they do have a medical diagnosis that falls within the diagnoses requirements for an IEP. Also want to make sure that you are indicating how many days that they have to respond to you, as well as how they can contact you. So I'll make sure that you guys have access to this so that you can revise it to meet your needs for your child when you are requesting that IEP with the school district. And then the third process is a teacher referral. And this is mostly for those kids who are already within the school system. They've already started school and the teacher is noticing some delays or, struggles with educational access. They can make a request for a child to receive an evaluation. Generally, the teacher should go to the parents to indicate that they do have concerns with regards to their student within the classroom and what those concerns are and what they're doing to address those concerns. But a teacher can request for them to have an evaluation to determine if they're eligible for services. If this occurs, a service provider will complete a screener prior to meeting with the family. So again, kind of like that child find screener, they'll complete a screener to see if they meet the qualifications for a fuller evaluation. This is probably the least common referral process because again, we want to make sure that our kids are set up for success before they start school. We don't want to wait until they get into school and see how they do. We want to make sure that they're set up with the proper supports, accommodations, modifications to meet their needs within the classroom. But it does happen in which a teacher may make a referral for an evaluation. I'm going to go into some timelines and move this down here. And this will be something that I will send to you guys as well. I think I sent it last week, but we want to make sure that you have all of the necessary timelines needed to request that IEP. So the first things first is, and I need to update the letter, it's 15 school days that they have to respond to requests for an evaluation or get parent requests. In IDEA, they have timelines set for how long it takes to get the evaluation done, the IEP, and all those things, but they leave it up to the state to determine their interpretation of that. So within IDEA, it's supposed to take 60 days after getting consent to have all of this completed. In the state of Illinois, our interpretation is school days. So although it says within 14 school days, which would be roughly, a little less than 3 school weeks, because there's 5 days within a school week. However, you have to take into consideration days off, teachers' institutes, spring breaks, Christmas breaks, things of that nature, because that will really throw off the timeline. So once you send in a request, your written request for an evaluation, they have 14 school days to respond to say, yes, we accept this, or no, we're going to not deny it. Again, if they are denying it, they need to tell you why, and they need to tell you what they're doing to kind of help address your concerns. Again, maybe having a meeting with the educational team to discuss it further would be helpful to at least get the ball rolling, so at least they have an understanding of where you're coming from with regards to the concerns of your child's educational growth. Once they say yes, they will send you a consent indicating that you are wishing to have an evaluation. They cannot provide an evaluation to your child until you provide that consent. So once you sign that consent, then they have 60 school days to complete the evaluation and hold the IEP meeting. So once you say yes, they will need to have that meeting to say, yes, your child is eligible, and then they'll have a separate meeting, sometimes on the same day, to go through the IEP process with regards to setting the goals, going through the accommodations modifications, and also talking about school placement. So they have 60 school days to complete that entire process. Sometimes what CPS has been doing is that once you provide consent, they will do the evaluation. They'll do the domain meeting, which is basically just indicating what domains of the IEP need to be tested for. So for occupational therapy, fine and gross motor abilities, any physical therapy, social work, psychologists will do a full educational psychology test. The social worker will also do a family history, the nurse for any health histories, and then there is more general, like the school psychologist will do a general educational testing as well. So they need to go through each of the domains and determine whether or not they need to be tested, and then they will do the evaluation. And like I said, sometimes what CPS will do is they'll do all of that in one day, do the evaluation, and then write the IEP. You do not need to do it this way. You can have it totally separate where they have the evaluation, and then a week later they have the IEP. Because technically CPS or any school district is supposed to provide you with the draft of the IEP at least 1 week before the IEP, so that you can go through and make sure that you understand, what's being written about your child, be prepared for questions and answers. But sometimes CPS will lump it all into one day if they feel that this IEP is going to be super simple for them to write. But again, you do not need to do it that way. You can space it out per your request. And then within 10 days after the eligible meeting, they will have written notice of the eligibility. They need to provide you with a letter indicating yes or no, you get special education services. And then within 30 days of finding your child is eligible for an IEP, they will have to finalize the IEP. So all within those 60 days, everything needs to be accounted for and complete. And that's why I always tell parents to get started as early as possible, given the amount of times that CPS is closed for holidays, teacher institute, report card pickup, those random things that happen can really extend all of this. And then you're making your way into summer. CPS does do some, very few, will do some assessments over the summer to write up IEPs and find kids eligible for those IEPs. However, They have a much smaller assessment team over the summer who focuses mostly on those screeners to assess whether or not they would be eligible for a full evaluation. So the likelihood of being assessed and evaluated over the summer, it's much lower than it is starting the school year. So I always encourage parents to get it started before that school year starts so that they have everything in place for the child to be successful at the start of the school year. We kind of talked about this, but I'm going to go through it again about a domain meeting versus an IEP meeting. Domain meetings will occur once the school and the parent have consented to an evaluation. It will involve various professionals. They're going to be evaluating the child to discuss information about what they may already know about the child and determine what areas are going to be assessed. If your child is not found, eligible to be assessed for that certain area, they will not be testing for it. Quite common what happens, so children here who receive physical therapy, sometimes are not found eligible for physical therapy services within the school because they're looking at, again, how does the disability or the diagnoses impact their ability to access the school environment and the curriculum that the school is providing to their gen ed population. If a child can, even though they do receive physical therapy services, they're able to ambulate and walk up and down stairs and transition from one place to the other without assistance, then more than likely will not be found eligible for physical therapy services. You can continue to receive your private therapy services through your insurance plan, but the school may say they're not eligible for it because it doesn't impact their ability to access the environment. After the domain meeting is held, the evaluations will occur. Again, sometimes CPS will do the domain meeting and then move directly into your evaluation so that they're helping along the process, and that's totally fine. After the evaluations occur, what needs to happen is that each of the therapists and the providers need to take time to score the evaluation, write up a short report indicating what they found them eligible for, what the scores mean, and things like that. And that will go into your eligibility meeting. So during that eligibility meeting, they're just talking over the reports, what they scored them on, how well they did during the evaluation, what strengths do they have, what weaknesses are they showing. They will not talk about goals. They will not talk about placement. It's just strictly, is this child eligible for special education services? Once that meeting is done, they essentially close the book on the eligibility meeting and then reopen for the IEP meeting. So the same people can be involved in the domain meeting, the eligibility meeting, and the IEP meeting, but they effectively have to have closing of the books and opening up the books and the sign-in sheets to keep all the processes separate. They kind of all build upon each other. In our experience with the citywide assessment team, they will do the domain meeting and then complete the evaluations the same day. Like I said before, if it's cut and dry, they'll have the IEPs at the same time after they go through the eligibility and evaluation results. They'll have that meeting at that day. However, you do not need to have it that way. If you feel that that is too rushed, you want more time, you want them to be thoughtful in their recommendations, you can request that you have the IEP set for a different date so that they take more time to score everything, have an understanding of what your child is able to do, what they struggle to complete. The purpose of the IEP meeting is to determine if the child is eligible for special education and or related services. And if the child is eligible, then the IEP team will write that IEP. This is where placements and services will be determined. Also, your goals will be written at this time. So I'm going to go through process sheets, and I'll be sure to share this with you guys as well. Oops, made that too big for you. So this IEP process sheet was written by Equip for Equality, which is another great resource and organization that can help with IEP advocacy, especially if you have a question of like, I don't know if my rights are being upheld. These are lawyers and individuals on legal teams that can help answer that question more specifically to you. They do have a phone number that you can call to ask questions, and then they'll give you a call back to indicate like, hey, we reviewed all the stuff that you said. This doesn't break the law, but this is where you should go, or this is what you should do next. They're a great source for that type of help. So this process sheet just goes through and explains what an IEP is. It also goes through parts of the IEP. We'll be talking about that here briefly in the next presentation, but the first part of the IEP is to go through present levels of performance. So, where are they at presently with their skills? What concerns do they have? You want to look at the most recent data. So anything that's 6 months or more in terms of data evaluations or progress reports or anything, it's too old. We want to make sure it's more current. So we need to make sure that we're having specific statements about how they're doing, what they struggle with, how their disability impacts their ability to perform in that specific area, all of those different things within that. We don't want to see like they're below grade level in, math and reading. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't tell us anything like where to start, how to write our goals, or anything like that. We want to make sure that we are expanding on that language to include more information as to what that exactly means. Goals will also be written in an IEP, and I always tell parents that we should use SMART goals. So these are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time specific. So it should address your child's unique needs. It should be measurable. You should be able to understand, when they are being evaluated for their goals, how are they meeting it? What are the specifications for that? It must be achievable. Like we want to set the bar a little high, but not too high to the point that they're not able to achieve it. But we also don't want to set it too low that they're achieving it too quickly and we have to constantly revise the IEP. So we have to find that sweet spot in terms of it being just a little bit challenging, but also reasonable enough for them to meet it before the end of the school year. Relevant, does it make sense for the child to be doing? I think one of the hard things about relevancy is looking at the Common Core that we are currently still utilizing within the United States is, matching up goals that meet the Common Core requirements. Most of the time, some of that would be like, for example, geography. Student will be able to identify, all 50 states and 50 capitals. Well, that might not be very relevant for a child who is struggling utilizing a communication device and barely knows their own address. Maybe for that, to meet that geography goal in the Common Core is looking at it from something that's more relevant in terms of teaching them, what city do they live in? What is their address? Or even what is their street? Maybe even identifying Illinois on a map or something of that nature would be more relevant for a child of that disability. And then time-specific goals should be something that can be reasonably achieved within a year. If they're not able to achieve it or they're still making progress, then it really wasn't achievable for them. So again, it takes, a hard time for teachers to figure out, what's challenging, but not too challenging enough. We'll also go through services that they'll receive. Those are your speech, OT, PT, social work, nursing services, as well as services with regards to paraprofessionals in terms of having a direct or shared paraprofessional within the classroom, or if it is a direct one-on-one paraprofessional, when is that provided versus a shared, when is that provided to the child? Looking at modifications and accommodations, this is how we help to create an accessible learning environment for the child. So what type of modifications or accommodations do we need to make in order for the child to access that general education curriculum as well as the building itself? So some examples could be modifying the task for extending time on assessments or assignments, removing them from a larger room to take their tests. Maybe it's a smaller setting, maybe it's a group setting, or a one-on-one smaller setting for taking tests, assistance with taking notes, large print books, voice recordings, often used especially for like colleges or something like that, having a voice recording that can transcribe it into notes for you. Modifications are changes and accommodations are supports. So we need to be creative with it, and you need to think how it will help your child and ask for it. This is where it gets really tricky because many times us as parents, I'm guilty myself, will say, oh, my kid needs all of these things in order to access the environment in the general education curriculum. However, think about how that's going to be implemented, and will it be implemented with integrity and fidelity? That's another key. So we need to make sure that we have grand understanding of what our child needs and what is most important, and prioritize those first. And then others can be not so much deprioritized, but thinking about, okay, it would be nice to have this, but this isn't my main concern for accommodations. If your child is 14 and a half or older, the IEP team should be thinking about transitioning of services after they get done with high school. So even though it seems like a very young age to be thinking about that, that time flies really quickly. So we want to make sure that we're talking about what it would look like for that child, and start planning ahead so that we can prepare them a lot better than they would if we started it in high school. Another thing that I accidentally skipped over was placement. So this is where we would talk about, where will your child receive these services? What classroom, what school, what placement will they have in order to receive these services? Again, it could be different from your neighborhood school, because maybe your neighborhood school does not offer some of those services or cannot meet those needs for your child, and they need to be serviced in another school placement. And that is completely fine. It would be nice to have all of our kids in our neighborhood schools because it makes it easier for travel and distance and things like that. But not all of our schools in the neighborhood districts can properly provide services to our children. So we want to make sure that they are placed in a placement that will help them. Other factors that you should consider: if your child exhibits behaviors, they may need a behavior intervention plan. They look at how does the behavior impact the learning of the child, as well as the learning of others within the classroom. So yes, they're looking at it from a safety perspective, such as those who engage in physical aggression or maybe self-injurious behavior, but they are also looking at behaviors that affect other kids' learning in that learning environment. If your child has limited English proficiency, the team must also consider any language needs that they have. Again, if they're blind or visually impaired, should the child be instructed in Braille? Likewise, if they're deaf or hard of hearing, we need to also consider this with their communication needs. So there's lots of different things, other factors that the IEP team should consider, and it should be individualized. That's the whole point of an IEP, is that is individualized to your child. The IEP team makes up your parents. You're a very important person within the role of creating this IEP. So make sure that you have a very strong voice to advocate for your child. Your student is also invited, even though I think at the age of 14 and a half, because we're talking about their transitions, they're required to be part of that IEP process. But your child as young as 3 during their EI could also make an appearance and talk about, what do they do really well and what do they struggle with? Like, they can have a voice in their IEP at any point in time. The special education teacher should also be present, as well as the general education teacher, because they must participate in it in order for them to talk about how they're doing in the general education classroom, what are they successful for, what recommendations they would make. Even if that child is not in a general education setting, a general education teacher is required to be present to talk about general education curriculum and needs. An administrator, whether this is the school principal, the case manager, or some other representative of the school, they're there to talk about the services and resources that the school can offer. And then other people who may be at the meeting, but they're not required to be present, is the evaluator and psychologist, other service providers such as your speech, OT, PT, social work, and then any other person that you choose to invite. You as a parent can invite anybody. They should not question why you want to invite somebody. It is your right to bring anybody to that meeting. So if you feel that your neighbor has the best information about how your child does and what they need, bring your neighbor. If you want to bring your PCBA, you want to bring the director of your child's school or things of that nature to help you and assist in portraying what your child is like, both their strengths and their weaknesses. It is your right to bring whoever you want to that meeting. As I mentioned before, it must be written on based on recent data, and it should be written to address the unique needs of your child. It may be helpful for you to prepare the meeting ahead of time by having some IEP prep, and I will share with you what that looks like. I have a very brief form where you can write, these are my kids' strengths. These are challenges that they have. These are things that I think they would do really well at, and this is what they struggle with. Like, there's all of those things. There's also a student section that you could ask the same of your child. Again, even if a child cannot understand, like, what is your strengths? You can ask them, what do you like to do at school? And have some choices out for them to pick from. And then that would be their way of communicating, their likes and their strengths. Talking with their educational team here at the academy can also help you. You can gather as many reports and things like that as you need to help best portray how your child is doing. And if you don't understand something, ask them to explain. It is not going to be the school process for them to explain things. They're going to automatically assume that you know your rights as well as know what everything means in an IEP. So if you don't understand something, speak up for yourself on behalf of your child. You are the person that's driving this bus. They should be listening to you and guiding you, but they will not know if you don't understand something unless you don't ask. So make sure that you are asking if you don't understand something. Okay, we kind of went into some of this stuff, but there's one key point that must be done. If a provider isn't available for a meeting, the family needs to be notified prior to the meeting. So let's say, even though it's not required for the speech, OT, PT, and social worker to be present, let's say that this IEP meeting is being called because you need to talk about communication concerns you're having with your child, and we need to update the speech goal. If the speech therapist is not going to be present for it, you need to be notified prior to the meeting. Another provider could be assigned to complete that portion of the meeting, so speak on their behalf. Another colleague, it wouldn't be like an OT person reporting on a speech therapist. It'd be another speech therapist who would sit in for that speech therapist to talk about the concerns, the goals, the updates. Or you can request to reschedule for when that provider is available. So one thing that you should think about is, whether or not it's important for that provider to be there. If you're there to talk about a concern with a math goal and the speech therapist can't make it, it's probably not necessary for the speech therapist to be there. So you can probably just continue on with the meeting without that person present. But obviously, if you are talking about something that is particular for that provider to be reporting on, then yes, you should have them present. You should either reschedule that or feel comfortable knowing that somebody is going to step in and can answer your questions fluently and with the full ability that they would have if it was that treating service provider. There needs to be a general education teacher present and a special ed teacher or a special ed director present to report at the IEP. Again, even if your child is never in a gen ed setting, they're in a full, separate special education classroom, they still need to be present to report on general education curriculum as relevant to that grade level that that child is being assigned to. Families will also be assigned a case manager through the school district, and the person will be assigned based on the needs of the child. And that case manager is basically just responsible for all the paperwork. They kind of sit at the front of the meeting and go through check boxes like, yep, we talked about this, and everything. So those people are just responsible to make sure everything is covered within the paperwork and updating the document as you go along. I'm going to go back to this page for a hot second to talk about one other thing that you should know about your meetings. Again, you can request whoever you want to come to your meetings and be present. There is a sign-in sheet at the beginning of an IEP. That sign-in sheet is just basically who is present. It does not mean that you agree or disagree with the IEP. It's just indicating who's present at the IEP. So you always have to sign that part to just indicate that, hey, I was here during the meeting. You must always be present at your IEP meetings. IEP meetings can be held via phone, they could be via Zoom, they could be in person, but in any case, you have to be present for the IEP. They can't continue on without you being present at it. It's illegal. And then lastly, like I mentioned before, they should be providing you with an IEP at least a week before the IEP is scheduled, so that you have time to review it. At the actual IEP meeting, they still have to go section by section. They may say, do you have any, you reviewed this? Great. Do you have any questions about it? Great. But that doesn't stop them. They need to go through the section and review it out loud with you. So even if you don't have questions or concerns about a certain section, you should still have them go through that section to detail it out. Because who knows, maybe sitting there, something dawns on you, you're like, wait. Now that you're saying it out loud, I don't understand this, and you can ask questions about it. So even if you review it ahead of time, they still have to go fully into detail at the IEP to review it even further. The last couple of minutes that, well, it's going to be a little bit longer than a couple of minutes, but the last systems that I want to talk about is called multi-tiered system of supports. This is separate from an IEP process, but often you will see this with those teacher referrals that they go through this process of systems of supports to help support students before they may, get a full referral for an evaluation. This is within many different school districts. It's just a framework used to ensure that all students have the supports they need to be successful. So this not necessarily does not apply to kids who have IEPs. IEPs can probably still fall under this, but this is for those kids who are at the cusp, like they're struggling with some, reading abilities or math abilities, but they don't quite make it to get a full evaluation done to determine if they're eligible for special education services. Or on the flip side, they have done that evaluation and they're still not found eligible for it. So it just allows the schools to identify students who may need some extra supports to give them that extra boost to make that progress within those certain areas. Students will receive supports through interventions, specific types of instruction or guidance. In theory, this should avoid the wait to fail mindset where we're just kind of just sitting around like, oh, yep, they're not doing well. We're just going to continue to let them not do well until it's just like, well, I tried everything and, we're here. And so now what? It should be able to identify why a student is not doing well and what supports they need to be successful. I don't think any of the kids that currently attend Academy will be under this multi-tiered system of supports, but I want to make sure that parents have a general understanding of what this is and what the expectations are, just in case something should happen and their child does fall in line with this. There are 3 tiers to MTSS. The first tier is just all students in all settings. So they're getting that general instruction. There's no modification, no extra supports, no pullouts, nothing of that nature. It's just everybody is all within that tier 1. There may be some differentiation being provided to some of the kids to help them make that progress. So, like highlighting certain words on a worksheet to help them stand out, to help that child, like really pay attention to what that is to determine the meaning of that word in that sentence. But for the most part, they're just providing general instruction. Tier 2, they have notified and identified that these are some students that are at risk and will occur in small group interventions. So this is when they will pull certain kids out who are found to be at risk for something. Say, for example, reading. They're a little bit below reading level. Maybe they have a hard time understanding reading comprehension. So they'll pull them into small groups to do interventions outside of what they're receiving within the general educational setting for general instruction. So it's just kind of a small little booster to kind of help them make that progress, connect that in a more small group way, providing other interventions for them to, figure out what it is in terms of the reading, and then hopefully graduate back into tier 1. And then tier 3 is your very, very at-risk students. These are individual students that will work one-on-one with a special, like a reading itinerant, or they're very, very small groups, 1 to 2 kids. Whereas the other one in tier 2, it might be even bigger, smaller groups, like 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So it's just as you're getting through the different tiers, the level of amount of kids in that tier that are working with you within that setting gets smaller and smaller so that there's more individualized attention on you for your concerns. The essential components of it is the first one is screening. So it's generally conducted 3 times a year by your teachers to identify students who may be at risk for poor outcomes on whether that's state assessments, district assessments, national assessments, as well as just overall risk for poor outcomes on their own individualized assessments within the grade level. And they need additional academic, social, emotional, and behavioral support. Screening is also used to identify patterns and trends of learning and achievement at the school and grade levels. Once they have been identified, they will use progress monitoring to ensure that the child is making progress. So using valid and reliable tools and processes to assess performance, quantity, or quantify the improvement that they're making of responsiveness to that intervention and instruction, and then evaluate the effectiveness of the instruction, interventions, and support. So basically, is this working? Yes or no? If it's not, then let's go back to the drawing board and figure out a different intervention and support that is needed to help this child. There's multi-level prevention system is in a continuum. You could start at tier 1, go to tier 2. You could go to tier 3, go back to tier 2, or go back to tier 1. It kind of all moves in a continuum of integrated academic, social, emotional, behavioral, instructional, and intervention supports that are evidence-based and culturally and linguistically responsive. And then it's based off of data. Again, going back to progress monitoring, we want to make sure that we're including data analysis and problem-solving team meetings to make decisions about the instruction, intervention, and implementation, as well as identifying any disabilities. Like, we've gotten to this level, we're at tier 3, we've tried X, Y, Z, and it's still not working, we're not seeing improvement. I think at this point, we need to move forward with determining if an evaluation is needed. Tier 1, all students receive the research-based core instruction implemented with integrity and emphasizing grade level standards and school-wide behavioral expectations. Again, this is just, what is the expectation of a child in 4th grade? What are they supposed to know? What are they supposed to learn? What types of supports is appropriate? There may be some differentiation going on, like I said, highlighting certain words within a sentence to help them stand out, bolding things, maybe lessening the expectations, like, I only want you to do 5 and then take a little mini break, and then we'll come back and do this again to help keep them going. Could be flexible grouping. You're very strategic in who you put in your groups to help kids that maybe, on that teetering to go to tier 2, maybe put somebody that is very strong in that tier 1 with the individual that's teetering to tier 2 to see if maybe peer support will help with that. High quality instruction is essential. We want to make sure that we have 80% of our student population within the tier 1. And tier 1 focuses on the implementation of the core curriculum that the district has and is in line with the Illinois learning standards. And then tier 2, I'm not going to go into all of this, but you basically have been identified as being at risk either academically or behaviorally through screeners that are completed. They're implemented within groups of students demonstrating common skill deficits or social, emotional, behavioral risk characteristics. And it's very targeted group interventions, typically involve additional minutes of instruction outside of the core instruction provided each week. Say, for example, that you are pulled for an extra 15 minutes or 30 minutes for a special reading group, and it's you and 5 other peers. They don't even have to be in your same class. They can be pulled from different classrooms, coming together to receive more specific and individualized instruction that's targeting the areas of those deficits to hopefully help support them to the point that they go back to that tier 1 level. And then tier 3 is what few students receive and is the most intense service level a school can provide to a student. Again, very small groups or even one-on-one attention, one-on-one individualized instruction. The purpose is to help them overcome significant barriers to learning academic and or behavioral skills required for that school success. It requires more time and a more narrow focus of instruction and intervention than tier 2 services. So as you get to tier 3, the longer that you'll be spending in those intervention services to help them make that progress to cross over back into tier 2 or tier 1. Purpose of the progress monitoring is to determine the effectiveness of an intervention plan on the student's learning. When data shows that they are progressing, the interventions are maintained until students meet the identified goals that are set forth by those teachers. And when the data shows that they're not progressing, they make a change in the intervention as necessary. Or say they make progress and they're close to it, but then something happens, they want to identify that and help get them back on track. Students receiving Tier 2 support should be progress monitored every other week, while students receiving Tier 3 should be progress monitored weekly. Implementation of intervention is approximately between 6 to 8 weeks, and then they'll determine what the next steps are for the students. Okay, that takes us through requesting of an IEP. I want to see if this page, just download this file and I'll show it this way. Okay. I will send this to all of you guys so you have access to it. But this is a Child Find Screening Program regional schedule. Again, this is free developmental screenings for those children between the ages of birth and 0 and 5 years. If your child is above 5 years, they will go directly to their school district to do the evaluation process. But this is just part of the Child Find screening to identify and locate those students that may require further evaluation. No appointment is necessary. You basically just show up at these libraries between the times that they are offered. Last screening will be conducted at 2:45, so make sure that you're there before it so that you can guarantee that you're a part of that screening. I will also state that, I probably start earlier in the day, like closer to some of these start at like 9:30 or 10:30, and we get there as quickly as possible so you can get in line. Sometimes, especially towards, when we're getting towards the May and June timeline, because they generally do not do screeners or assessments over the summer break. Many people start coming to that so they can, ensure that they will get some level of services for an IEP starting in September. So you end up waiting for a very long time. So make sure that if you are going to take advantage of the Child Find screeners, that you bring lots to do, bring little snacks, bring drinks, maybe use the tablet or a screen to kind of keep them occupied with their favorite songs, just so that you are well prepared in case you do have to wait. To schedule an in-person developmental screening appointment for your child or for further information, you can contact the Child Find coordinator at this number, as well as CPS Child Find at cps.edu. Otherwise, if your child is 5 years and up, you will go directly to that neighborhood school to request it. Or you can contact the Office of Students with Disabilities to schedule one and for them to help you. I'm more than happy to help connect you and figure out who your neighborhood school is and who that person is that you can contact in order to do your evaluation. Another resource on the CPS website is they do have schools, and you can, obviously they have schools. You can look for the school that is nearest you by clicking on View Schools in the School Locator button. This will bring you up to a map, and you can enter in your home address. So if I enter in the address of us here at the academy, it'll link it here, and then it will tell me which 2 schools or more, but they will tell me which one is the K-8 and which one is the 9 through 10 or 9 through 12. So we are located for the academy. Our neighborhood school would be Burr. So if I just click on that, it will also take me to where I can see their information, and I believe somewhere on here is their website. If you click on more information, it'll take you to the school overview, and from there you can do the school website. And here it's just basically trying to figure out who it is that you'll contact. So if you go onto a faculty staff page, you can find, their names. Clicking on it may show you their email address or automatically pop up for Outlook to email them directly. So you're looking for the administration staff, mostly the principal. You want to email the principal. And then usually what I do is I just scroll down until I can find other service providers. Like here's their other staff. I don't see with this school They have a counselor and personalized learning coordinator. Those two might be the ones that I would also email, because I don't see with this school a case manager that's assigned directly to this school. So the principal and then the counselor would be two that I would email. Is my school that I was going to email with that. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna come back here. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or anything that you would like to discuss before we hop off?
No, I think we're okay.
Okay, awesome, Nadia. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I'll send everything out to you guys so you have everything ready to go. But if you have questions, you know where to find me.
Thank you, Natalie.
All right, have a good one. Bye.